The wanted advertisement had been pinned to the general store wall for 3 weeks before Xavier Crawford finally admitted he needed help. And when Grace Morgan walked through his ranch gate that September afternoon in 1878, her head held high despite the twisted scar tissue that covered the entire left side of her face from temple to jaw, something shifted in his chest that he could not name. The Arizona Territory sun blazed overhead as Xavier stood on his porch watching her approach, noting the way she carried herself with dignity despite the threadbare condition of her traveling dress, and the small carpet bag that contained what he assumed were all her worldly possessions. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with auburn hair pulled back severely from her face as though she had long ago given up trying to hide what the fire had done to her. Her right side showed a woman who might have been called pretty once, with delicate features and intelligent green eyes. Her left side told a story of survival and suffering. "Mr. Crawford," she called out when she reached the bottom step of the porch. Her voice was steady, though he could see her fingers gripping the handle of her bag tightly enough to turn the knuckles white. "That would be me." Xavier descended the steps, removing his hat in a gesture of respect his mother had drilled into him before she passed. He was 26, tall and lean from years of working the land, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of creek water. "You are here about the position, Grace Morgan. I am here about the housekeeping position, yes." She met his gaze directly, a challenge in her eyes that suggested she expected rejection and had armored herself against it. "I can cook, clean, mend, and manage household accounts. I have references from my previous employer in Tucson." Xavier had been running the ranch alone since his father died 6 months ago, and the house showed it. Dust covered every surface, dishes piled in the basin, and he had been eating beans and hardtack for so long he had nearly forgotten what a proper meal tasted like. He had placed the advertisement more out of desperation than hope, never expecting anyone to respond. "The pay is $15 a month, room and board included," he said, watching her face for a reaction. "There is a small room off the kitchen that would be yours. The work is steady but not backbreaking. I spend most of my time with the cattle, so you would have the house to yourself during the day." "When would you like me to start?" Grace asked, and he realized she had not flinched or looked away once during their conversation. Most people could not help but stare at her scars or avert their eyes entirely, as though her disfigurement might be contagious. "Today, if you are willing. I will show you the house and you can tell me if it suits you." She followed him inside, and he tried to see the place through her eyes. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting space all together, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and his father's old rocking chair positioned near it. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight coming through the windows, and he suddenly felt embarrassed by the state of things. "I have let it go since my father passed," he said, more to fill the silence than to excuse himself. "I kept meaning to hire someone but kept putting it off." Grace set down her carpetbag and walked slowly through the space, running her finger along the table and examining the kitchen area with a critical eye. "You need proper supplies. Soap, vinegar, fresh lye. When was the last time these floors were scrubbed?" "Honestly, I could not tell you." She turned to face him, and for the first time he saw a hint of amusement in her expression. "And you call yourself civilized?" The unexpected tease caught him off guard, and he found himself smiling. "I call myself a rancher. Civilization is what I am trying to hire." "Fair enough." She moved toward the small room off the kitchen, peering inside at the narrow bed and simple dresser. "This will do nicely. I assume I can make a list of supplies I will need, and you will advance me the funds to purchase them in town, of course. Take the wagon tomorrow if you like." I will write you a note for the general store. Grace nodded, already rolling up her sleeves. Then with your permission, I will start with these dishes and see about making something edible for supper. You have a smokehouse, a root cellar, both, though neither is well stocked. Show me what you have, and I will work with it. As Xavier led her outside to show her the various outbuildings, he found himself stealing glances at her profile. The scars were extensive, pulling at the corner of her left eye and distorting her mouth slightly on that side. But there was something in the set of her shoulders and the efficiency of her movements that spoke of strength rather than defeat. "May I ask what happened?" he said, then immediately regretted the question. "Forgive me, that was inappropriate." "It was a house fire when I was 17, Grace said matter-of-factly, as though reciting the weather. "In Flagstaff. My parents and younger sister did not make it out. I did, but the beam fell across my face before I reached the door. I am sorry for your loss. It was 5 years ago. I have learned to live with it." They reached the smokehouse, where several slabs of bacon and a ham hung from hooks. The root cellar yielded potatoes, onions, and some withered carrots. Grace examined everything with a practiced eye, making mental notes. "This will do for tonight," she said finally. "But we will need more variety. Canned goods, flour, sugar, dried beans. Do you have chickens?" "Had them. A coyote got into the coop last month and I have not replaced them yet." "Add that to the list then. Fresh eggs make all the difference." As they walked back to the house, Xavier felt something unfamiliar settling over him. It was not pity exactly, nor was it mere relief at having hired help. It was more like recognition, as though he had been waiting for someone to see past the loneliness of this place and find its possibilities. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table, while Grace moved around the space with quiet competence, transforming the meager supplies into a meal of fried potatoes with onions and bacon. Accompanied by fresh biscuits, she somehow conjured from the ancient flour tin. The smell alone made his mouth water. "You eat at the table, not standing at the stove," he said when she made to serve him and retreat. She paused, the plate in her hands. "It would not be proper." "Proper according to who? I am not some grand rancher with servants." "You work for me, yes, but we are the only 2 people for miles. I would appreciate the company at meals if you are willing." Grace set the plate down in front of him, then slowly prepared her own. She took the seat across from him, angling herself so her scarred side was less visible, a habit he suspected she did not even realize. "Tell me about this ranch," she said as they began to eat. "How long has it been in your family?" "My father bought this land in 1865, right after the war ended," Xavier said between bites. The food was simple but perfectly seasoned, better than anything he had tasted in months. "He built this house with his own hands, brought my mother out from Missouri. I was born here in 52. It has been a hard life, but a good one mostly. And now you run it alone, since he died, yes. Heart gave out one day while he was mending fence. I found him that evening when he did not come in for supper." The memory still stung, but time had softened the sharp edges of grief. "What about you?" "You said you had a previous employer in Tucson," Grace nodded, chewing thoughtfully before answering. "A merchant family. I kept house for them for 3 years. They were kind enough, but when their eldest son began courting seriously, his intended made it clear she did not want someone like me in the household. I was not dismissed exactly, but it was suggested I might be happier elsewhere." The matter-of-fact way she stated this made Xavier's jaw tighten with anger on her behalf. "That is unkind." "That is the world," Grace said simply. "People do not like to be reminded of misfortune. They fear it might rub off on them somehow. I have learned not to take it personally." "Well, you do not need to worry about that here. I care about whether you can cook and keep house, not about scars." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw surprise flicker across her face. "Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Xavier. If we are eating together, we might as well use first names. Then you should call me Grace." They finished the meal in companionable silence, and when Xavier helped her clear the dishes despite her protests, he caught himself studying her hands as she worked. They were capable hands, neither soft nor calloused to leather, the hands of someone who knew work but had not been broken by it. That night, lying in his bed in the small room off the main area, Xavier listened to the sounds of Grace settling into her own space. He had grown so accustomed to the silence of the house that the presence of another person felt both strange and comforting. He thought about the scars on her face and the matter-of-fact way she spoke about her tragedy, and he felt something shift inside him that he could not quite name. The next morning, Grace was already up and working when Xavier emerged at dawn. She had somehow managed to scrub half the kitchen floor and had coffee waiting, strong and black the way he liked it. "You did not have to start so early," he said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Old habits." The Hutchinson family expected breakfast at 6 sharp. She wiped her hands on her apron. "I thought I would take the wagon into town today as you suggested. The list of supplies is quite long. Of course, I will hitch up the team after I check on the cattle. There is money in the tin on the mantel. Take what you need." Xavier spent the morning riding his fence line, checking for breaks and counting heads, but his mind kept drifting back to the house and its new occupant. He found himself wondering what Grace thought of the place, whether she would stay beyond the first few weeks, whether she found the isolation oppressive or peaceful. When he returned at midday, the wagon was gone and the house was transformed. The floors gleamed, the windows sparkled, and every surface had been scrubbed clean. Fresh linens hung on the line outside, snapping in the breeze. The change was so dramatic it almost took his breath away. Grace returned late in the afternoon, the wagon loaded with supplies. Xavier helped her unload, noting the practical nature of her purchases. Bulk goods that would stretch far, basic staples, but also a few small luxuries like real coffee beans and a jar of honey. "I hope I did not overspend," she said, watching him examine the goods. "But I believe in keeping a well-stocked kitchen. It saves money in the long run. You have a better head for this than I do. I trust your judgment." Over the following days, a routine established itself. Xavier would rise before dawn, take his coffee, and head out to work the ranch. Grace would spend the day cooking, cleaning, and slowly bringing order to the chaos of the house. They would share meals together, conversations gradually becoming less formal and more natural. Xavier found himself looking forward to these mealtimes more than he cared to admit. Grace had a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh, something that had been rare in recent months. She was well-read, having spent years borrowing books from the Tucson Lending Library, and could discuss everything from Greek philosophy to agricultural techniques. "You should have been a teacher," he said one evening as she explained the theories of crop rotation she had read about. "I applied once," Grace said, her scarred mouth twisting in what might have been a smile. "The school board said I would frighten the children." The casual cruelty of it made Xavier set down his fork. "That is unconscionable. That is reality. People see the scars first and the person never. I have made peace with it." "Have you?" The words came out more sharply than he intended. "Forgive me, but it seems to me you have simply learned to expect the worst from people. That is not the same as peace." Grace was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "What would you have me do? Rail against the unfairness of it? I tried that for the first year. It changed nothing except to make me bitter. I would have you remember that not everyone is so shallow. Some people can see past the surface." "Can they?" She looked at him directly then, and he saw the challenge in her eyes. Or do they simply become accustomed to it, the way one stops noticing a crack in a wall after a while? Xavier leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. The first day you arrived, do you know what I noticed about you? I imagine it would be difficult to miss the scars. I noticed the way you held your head up despite expecting rejection. I noticed the intelligence in your eyes and the capability in your hands. I noticed that you looked at this rundown place and saw possibility rather than disaster. He paused. And yes, I noticed the scars. But they were not the first thing, and they were not the most important thing. Grace stared at him, something vulnerable flickering across her face before she schooled her expression back to neutrality. You are a strange man, Xavier Crawford, so I have been told. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, a door opening just a crack. As September faded into October, the weather cooled and the ranch work intensified. Xavier spent long days moving cattle to different pastures, repairing fence and preparing for winter. He hired 2 temporary hands to help with the work, a grizzled old cowpuncher named Sam and his younger partner Jake. The first time the men came to the house for lunch, Xavier watched them carefully for their reactions to Grace. Sam barely glanced at her, more interested in the food she set before them. Jake stared openly until Sam cuffed him upside the head. "Mind your manners, boy," Sam growled. "The lady put effort into this meal and you are being rude." Grace kept her face impassive as she served them, but Xavier saw the tension in her shoulders. After the men returned to work, he found her in the kitchen, scrubbing an already clean pot with unnecessary force. "They mean no harm," he said gently. "I know." She set down the pot with more force than necessary. "I am used to it. That does not mean I enjoy it. Jake is young and thoughtless. Sam will educate him. Will he educate the next person and the person after that? I could spend my entire life educating people on how not to stare, and there would still be more." Xavier moved closer, drawn by the frustration in her voice. "You are right. You should not have to. People should be better than they are, but they are not, and I am sorry for that." Grace turned to face him, and he saw tears glistening in her eyes that she refused to let fall. "Why are you being kind to me?" The question caught him off guard. "Why would I not be?" "Because people are not kind to me, Xavier, not truly. They are either cruel or they pity me, and I am not sure which is worse." "I do not pity you." He took a step closer, close enough to see the precise pattern of the scar tissue, the way it had healed in ridges and valleys. "I admire you. You survived something terrible and you kept going. You made a life for yourself despite people making it harder than it needed to be. That takes strength most people will never need to find." "You see me differently than most people do," she whispered. "I see you as you are, and what I see is beautiful." The words hung in the air between them, and Xavier realized with a start that he meant them, not in spite of the scars or blind to them, but including them as part of the whole person she was. Grace stared at him with wide eyes, her lips parted in surprise. "You cannot mean that," she said finally. "I do not say things I do not mean. Xavier, I am disfigured. Half my face is twisted and scarred. Beautiful is not a word that applies to me anymore." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched the scarred side of her face. She flinched but did not retreat, her breathing shallow. "This is part of you," he said softly, his fingers tracing the edge of a ridge of scar tissue. "It is part of your story, part of what made you who you are, and who you are is beautiful to me. Your strength, your intelligence, your dry humor, your capability, yes, but also this." His fingers moved gently across her scarred cheek. "This is evidence of survival. This is proof that you fought your way out of fire and kept living. How could that be anything but beautiful?" A tear escaped down Grace's unscarred cheek, followed by another. "No one has ever touched me there, not since the doctor finished treating the burns. Does it hurt?" "No, it is mostly numb." She drew in a shaky breath. "It is just that people avoid it. They avoid looking at it, speaking of it, and they certainly do not touch it, as though it is shameful." "There is no shame in survival." Grace reached up and caught his hand, pressing it more firmly against her scarred cheek. "Say it again. You are beautiful." "I do not think I believe you yet," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But I want to. Then I will say it as many times as it takes." Xavier was not sure who moved first, but suddenly they were closer, her face tilted up toward his. He could feel her breath on his lips, could see the pulse fluttering in her throat. His other hand came up to cup her unscarred cheek, and he leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. Grace made a small sound in her throat and her hands came up to grip his shirt. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I did not expect this," Grace said, her forehead resting against his. "When I came here, I did not expect kindness, and I certainly did not expect this." "Neither did I, but I am not sorry for it. Nor am I." She pulled back slightly to look at him. "But Xavier, you must understand. People will talk if they see us together. They will say terrible things. They will say you are desperate or strange or that I have somehow tricked you. I do not care what people say. You say that now, but you have not experienced it yet. The whispers, the stares, the pity for you, and the disgust for me." Xavier took both her hands in his. "Listen to me, Grace Morgan. I am 26 years old. I have spent the last 6 months alone in this house, working myself to exhaustion and barely eating, because I could not seem to find a reason to do more than simply survive. Then you walked through that gate with your head held high and your eyes full of challenge, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to want to come home at the end of the day. You have brought life back to this place and to me. If people want to gossip about that, let them. I will not trade what we have for their approval. You hardly know me. What if I am not what you think? Then we will get to know each other better, but I know enough already to know I want to try." Grace searched his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we will try." "But slowly, Xavier. I have been hurt enough in my life. I need to know this is real before I give all of myself to it. As slowly as you need. I am not going anywhere." They stood in the kitchen, hands clasped together, as the afternoon light slanted through the windows and dust motes danced in the air. Xavier felt a sense of rightness settle over him, as though all the disparate pieces of his life had finally aligned. The following weeks brought a deepening of their connection. Xavier made a point of seeking Grace out during the day, bringing her wildflowers he found on the range or interesting stones from the creek bed. She would smile when she saw him coming, the expression transforming her face despite the scars. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit together by the fireplace. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, Grace mending while Xavier worked on tack repair. The physical affection between them grew gradually. A touch on the shoulder while passing in the kitchen. His hand at the small of her back as they walked outside to watch the sunset. Her fingers threading through his as they sat by the fire. Each touch was precious, something to be savored. Xavier found himself falling in love slowly and completely, like snow accumulating on the ground in winter. He loved the way Grace hummed while she worked, the way she tasted each dish critically before serving it, the way she read the newspaper with fierce concentration, as though daring the world to continue disappointing her expectations. He loved her strength and her vulnerability, her sharp wit and her hidden softness. One evening in late October, As they sat watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Grace turned to him with unusual seriousness. "Xavier, I need to tell you something about my past." He waited, giving her space to find the words. "After the fire, after I recovered from the worst of the burns, I was sent to live with my mother's sister in Tucson. She was a widow, and she agreed to take me in out of duty rather than affection." Grace's voice was steady, but her hands twisted in her lap. "She made it clear that I was a burden, that my presence made it difficult for her to maintain her social standing. She told me I should be grateful she did not simply leave me to the charity ward." Xavier felt anger kindle in his chest but kept his voice calm. "That must have been difficult. I worked for my keep, cooking, cleaning, caring for her when she was ill. When I turned 20, she informed me that I needed to find employment elsewhere, that she had done her Christian duty and I was now on my own." Grace looked out at the darkening horizon. "The Hutchinson family hired me shortly after. They were kind, truly, but I was always aware that I was there on sufferance, that my position was precarious. And now," Xavier asked gently, "now I find myself in a situation I never imagined, with a man who says I am beautiful and looks at me like he means it, and I am terrified, Xavier. Because I have nothing. No family, no money, no prospects beyond the employment you gave me. If this goes wrong, if you change your mind or realize you have made a mistake, I will have nowhere to go and no one to turn to." Xavier shifted to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Then I will make you a promise right now, Grace Morgan. Regardless of what happens between us romantically, you have a home here as long as you want it. If we try this and it does not work, you still have your position as housekeeper, and you still have your room, and you still have a place where you are valued and respected. I give you my word on that." "Why?" The word came out as almost a sob. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because everyone deserves at least one person in their life who sees their worth and will not abandon them. Because you have already become important to me, and I will not let you suffer for taking a chance on something good. And because it is the right thing to do." Grace threw her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. He could feel her tears soaking into his shirt, feel the trembling in her body. He held her tightly, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring wordless comfort. "I think I am falling in love with you," she whispered against his neck, "and it terrifies me." "I am already in love with you," he replied, "and it terrifies me too, but I would rather be terrified together than safe and alone." They sat like that as the stars began to emerge overhead, holding each other against the darkness and the cold. November brought the first hard frost and a new routine. Sam and Jake finished their contract work and moved on, leaving Xavier and Grace alone at the ranch again. The cattle were moved to the winter pasture closer to the house, and the pace of work slowed to maintenance and preparation. Xavier began teaching Grace to ride, putting her on his father's old mare, a gentle creature named Molly who had infinite patience for beginners. Grace was terrified at first, gripping the saddle horn with white knuckles, but gradually relaxed as she learned to move with the horse's gait. "I never thought I would do this," she said one afternoon as they walked the horses along the creek. "I always assumed riding was for other people. People who fit into the world in ways I do not." "You fit into my world perfectly," Xavier said, and was rewarded with one of her rare, full smiles. As they grew more comfortable together, the physical aspect of their relationship deepened. They shared longer kisses now, passionate embraces that left them both breathless. Xavier was always careful, always respectful, waiting for Grace to set the pace. She was still skittish sometimes, still waiting for the other boot to drop, but gradually she began to relax into the certainty of his affection. One evening in early December, as they sat by the fire, Grace turned to him with a question in her eyes. "Stay with me tonight, in my room." "I do not want to be alone." "Are you sure?" Xavier asked, his heart pounding. "I am sure. I want to be with you properly as your woman if you want me." "I have wanted you since the first day you walked through that gate," he said honestly, "but only if you are certain." In answer, Grace stood and took his hand, leading him to her small room. In the privacy of that space, by the light of a single lamp, they came together with a tenderness that bordered on reverence. Xavier took his time, learning every curve of her body, kissing the scars on her face and shoulder with the same devotion he showed the rest of her. Grace cried at first, overwhelmed by being treated with such care, but the tears gave way to gasps of pleasure as they learned each other's bodies. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Grace traced patterns on Xavier's chest with her fingertips. "I never thought this could be mine, this feeling of being wanted, being cherished. It is yours for as long as you want it, for as long as I draw breath, if you will have me." Is that a proposal, Xavier Crawford? He had not planned it this way, had thought he would wait for spring, but the words came naturally. "It is, if you want it to be. Grace Morgan, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" She was quiet for so long he worried he had misjudged, but then she kissed him fiercely. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They spent the rest of the night talking about their future, making plans in the darkness. They would marry in the spring, Grace decided, giving them time to prepare and to save money for the small celebration she wanted. They would expand the house, adding a proper bedroom and maybe a room that could eventually become a nursery. They would build a life together, here on this land, creating something good from the ashes of their pasts. December brought snow and enforced isolation. They were snowed in for nearly a week, and Xavier found he did not mind in the slightest. He and Grace spent the days working on indoor projects, sewing curtains and planning the house expansion. The nights they spent in each other's arms, learning the rhythms of life as a couple. When the snow cleared enough for travel, Xavier insisted they ride into town together. Grace was reluctant, knowing that their relationship would draw attention, but he refused to hide what they had. The town of Mojave, Arizona, was small, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other businesses. Xavier hitched the wagon outside the store and helped Grace down, keeping her hand in his as they walked inside. The store owner, a portly man named Walter Green, looked up from his ledger and froze when he saw them. His eyes went from Grace's face to their joined hands and back again. "Mr. Crawford," he said carefully. "Miss Morgan, how can I help you today?" "We need to place an order for lumber and hardware," Xavier said evenly. "We are expanding the house. Also, my fiancée will need fabric for a wedding dress." The last word hung in the air like a challenge. Grace's hand tightened in his, but she kept her chin up and her expression neutral. "Fiancé," Walter repeated, his eyes widening. "I see. Well, congratulations are in order then." News traveled fast in a small town. By the time they finished their business at the store and moved on to the land office to file the marriage intention, they had drawn stares and whispers from half the population of Mojave. Some people looked curious, others shocked, and a few wore expressions of pity or disgust. Xavier ignored them all, keeping Grace close and maintaining a calm, pleasant demeanor. They filed the paperwork, arranged for lumber delivery, and stopped at the church to speak with Pastor Williams about a spring wedding. The pastor, an elderly man with kind eyes, studied them both for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Crawford, I must ask, are you certain about this union? Marriage is a sacred covenant not to be entered into lightly." "I am absolutely certain, Pastor." Grace is the woman I want to spend my life with. Pastor Williams turned to Grace. And you, Miss Morgan, you are entering this marriage of your own free will. I am, sir. Xavier is a good man, and I love him. The pastor nodded slowly. Then I will be honored to perform the ceremony. Come see me in March, and we will discuss the details. As they drove home, Grace was quiet, staring at the landscape passing by. You are thinking very hard about something, Xavier observed. I am thinking about all those people staring at us, judging us. Does it bother you? Yes and no. Yes, because it is uncomfortable to be the object of gossip and speculation. No, because I have been stared at for 5 years. At least now they are staring at something good in my life instead of just the scars. She turned to look at him. You handled it well. You were not embarrassed or defensive. Why would I be embarrassed? I was in town with my beautiful fiancée making plans for our future. I have nothing to hide and nothing to defend. Grace smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Have I told you lately that you are a remarkable man? Not in the last few hours. I could stand to hear it again. She laughed, the sound carrying across the winter landscape, and Xavier felt his heart swell with love for her. Winter deepened and turned toward spring. The lumber for the house expansion arrived in late February, and Xavier began the work of framing out the new rooms with help from a carpenter from town. Grace spent her days sewing her wedding dress from the cream-colored fabric they had purchased, working by the window for the best light. They settled into a comfortable domesticity that felt like coming home. Grace learned to anticipate Xavier's needs, having coffee ready before he asked, and preparing the foods she had learned he favored. Xavier learned her rhythms too, knowing when she needed quiet company and when she needed conversation, when a touch on the shoulder was welcome, and when she needed space to work through her thoughts. In early March, they had their first real fight. Xavier came in from working on the new room addition to find Grace in tears at the kitchen table, a letter crumpled in her fist. What happened? He dropped to his knees beside her chair, immediately concerned. Are you hurt? My aunt wrote, Grace said, her voice thick with tears and anger. She heard about our engagement somehow. She wrote to tell me that I am making a fool of myself, that I am trapping you into a marriage you will come to regret, and that I should release you from your obligation before I ruin your life with my presence. Xavier felt rage unlike anything he had known surge through him. Let me see that letter. No, I should not have let it upset me. I should have expected it. Grace, let me see the letter. She handed it over reluctantly, and he read through the spiteful words with growing fury. The aunt had indeed heard about the engagement, and she had taken it upon herself to write a letter dripping with venom disguised as concern. She suggested that Grace was taking advantage of Xavier's loneliness, that she was deformed and should know better than to inflict herself on a decent man, that any children from such a union would be cursed. Xavier stood and walked to the fireplace, throwing the letter into the flames. That woman is poison. She is my only living relative. Then you are better off without her. Grace, look at me. He waited until she met his eyes. There is not one word of truth in that entire hateful letter. You are not trapping me. I am not obligated. I am choosing you every single day because you are who I want, and any children we have will be blessed, not cursed, because they will have you as a mother. But what if she is right? What if you do come to regret this? I will not. You cannot know that. Yes, I can. Xavier knelt beside her again, taking her hands. Grace, you know what my life was like before you came here. I was existing, not living, going through the motions because I had to, not because I wanted to. This ranch, this house, it was just a place where I slept and worked. But with you here, it became a home. You brought life back to this place and to me. Why would I ever regret that? Because people will always see the scars first. They will always wonder what is wrong with you that you chose someone like me. Let them wonder. I know the truth, and so do you. That is all that matters. Grace pulled one hand free and touched his face, her fingers trembling. I am afraid, Xavier, not of you but of the world, of all the ways this could go wrong. Then be afraid. I will be brave enough for both of us until you feel safe again. She pulled him close, holding him tightly, and he felt her tears soaking into his shirt for the second time since they had met. But this time, when she pulled back, there was determination in her eyes alongside the fear. No more letters from my aunt, she said firmly. If she writes again, I will burn them unread. She has no place in our life together. Agreed. And Grace, anyone who makes you feel less than you are has no place in our lives, family or not. That night, they made love with an intensity born of the fight, of the fear and anger and ultimate recommitment to each other. Afterward, as they lay in the darkness, Grace spoke into the silence. I want children with you. I want to fill this house with life and laughter. I want to prove my aunt wrong about every single thing she said. We will, Xavier promised. We will build something so beautiful here that anyone who sees it will know how wrong she was. Their wedding took place on a Sunday morning in late April, with wildflowers blooming across the range and the sky a brilliant blue overhead. Grace wore the dress she had sewn herself, simple but elegant, with her hair pinned up and a small bouquet of desert blooms in her hands. Xavier wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed for the occasion, his heart pounding as he waited at the altar. The church was not full. Sam had ridden in for the occasion, along with a few of the neighboring ranchers Xavier had known all his life. The town doctor attended, as did Walter Green from the general store and his wife. It was a small gathering, but everyone present was genuinely happy for them. When Grace walked down the aisle on Sam's arm, having asked the old cowpuncher to stand in for her missing father, Xavier felt his throat tighten with emotion. She looked beautiful, the scars on her face somehow making her more striking rather than less, evidence of survival and strength. Pastor Williams performed a simple but heartfelt ceremony. When it came time for the vows, Xavier spoke as clearly and firmly, wanting no one to doubt his commitment. I, Xavier Crawford, take you, Grace Morgan, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as we both shall live. I promise to see you as you truly are, beautiful and strong and worthy of every good thing this life can offer. I promise to build a life with you that will be our refuge and our joy. Grace's voice was steady as she spoke her own vows, though tears streamed down her face. I, Grace Morgan, take you, Xavier Crawford, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for as long as we both shall live. I promise to be your partner in all things, to build a home with you, and to never forget the gift you have given me in seeing past the surface to the person beneath. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed Grace tenderly, aware of all the eyes on them but caring only about the woman in his arms. She kissed him back with joy and relief and love, and when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food prepared by several of the neighboring ranch wives who had taken Grace under their collective wing. It was a simple celebration, but filled with genuine warmth. Sam told embarrassing stories about Xavier's early days learning to rope cattle, making everyone laugh. Mrs. Green gave Grace advice on keeping house in the territory, treating her with the same respect she would show any new bride. As the sun began to set and the guests departed, Xavier and Grace stood on their porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. "We did it," Grace said, leaning against his shoulder. "We are married. How does it feel? Like coming home?" "Like finding a place I did not know I was looking for." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "Thank you, Xavier, for seeing me, for choosing me, for giving me a life I thought I could never have. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely rancher with a rundown house and too many cattle. For bringing this place back to life. For teaching me what it means to truly love someone." They went inside together, husband and wife, and closed the door on the world outside. The first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The house expansion was completed by summer, giving them a proper bedroom and a room that Grace immediately began preparing as a nursery, hope in her eyes. The cattle multiplied, and Xavier hired seasonal help to manage the growing herd. Grace proved to be not just a capable housekeeper, but a true partner in running the ranch. She took over the bookkeeping entirely, discovering that Xavier had been undercharging for his cattle and negotiating better prices with buyers who came calling. She started a large vegetable garden and learned to preserve food for the winter. She befriended the neighboring ranchers' wives, slowly building a social network that enriched both their lives. In September, on the one-year anniversary of her arrival at the ranch, Grace told Xavier she was pregnant. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," she kept repeating, as though she could not quite believe it. "Xavier, we are going to have a baby." "We are going to be a family," he corrected, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "We already are a family, but now we will be adding to it." The pregnancy was not easy. Grace suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, unable to keep food down and losing weight she could ill afford to spare. Xavier hovered anxiously, bringing her water and crackers, rubbing her back when the nausea overwhelmed her. "This is normal," she assured him, though she looked pale and exhausted. "The doctor says it should pass after the first few months. I hate seeing you suffer. It will be worth it. This baby will be worth anything." He could not argue with that, so he simply did his best to care for her, taking over more of the household tasks and hiring a local girl to help with the heavy cleaning. As Grace's pregnancy progressed and the sickness passed, she bloomed. Her face grew rounder, her body fuller, and she seemed to glow with happiness. Xavier found himself falling in love with her all over again, watching her talk to the baby as she knitted tiny clothes, seeing her face light up when the baby kicked. The neighboring women rallied around Grace, bringing gifts and advice, treating her as one of their own. She cried the first time Mrs. Green organized a quilting bee in her honor, overwhelmed by the acceptance and friendship being offered. "They see you," Xavier told her that night as they lay in bed, his hand on her swollen belly. "They see the real you, the person I fell in love with. I told you not everyone is shallow." "I am learning to believe you," she said softly. "Slowly, but I am learning." In May of 1880, Grace went into labor on a warm spring afternoon. Xavier sent for the doctor and Mrs. Green, then paced the house anxiously while the women tended to his wife. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Xavier could hear Grace's cries of pain and felt helpless, able to do nothing but wait. Finally, as the sun climbed toward noon, he heard a new sound, the cry of a baby. He burst into the bedroom to find Mrs. Green cleaning a tiny, squirming infant while the doctor tended to Grace. "You have a son," Mrs. Green announced, smiling broadly. "A healthy boy with good lungs." Xavier rushed to Grace's side. She looked exhausted, her hair plastered to her head with sweat, but she was smiling as she reached for the baby. "Mrs. Green placed the infant in her arms, and Xavier saw his wife's face transform with love so pure it took his breath away. "He is perfect," Grace whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Xavier, look at him. He is perfect." Xavier looked at his son, tiny and red-faced and beautiful, and felt something shift fundamentally in his chest. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Thomas, after my father. Thomas Xavier Crawford." "That is perfect. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, son." The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Thomas was a demanding baby, crying frequently and sleeping in short bursts. Xavier and Grace took turns walking him at night, both bleary-eyed and exhausted, but unable to stop marveling at the tiny life they had created. Grace was fiercely protective of her son, as though she feared someone might try to take him away. She nursed him and changed him and sang to him in a soft, sweet voice Xavier had never heard before. She was a natural mother, patient and loving, and Xavier fell in love with her all over again watching her care for their child. "I never thought I would have this," she said one night as she nursed Thomas in the rocking chair Xavier had made for her. "I never thought anyone would want to build a life with me, let alone give me children." "You deserve this and more," Xavier said from where he sat nearby, watching his family. "You deserve everything good this world has to offer. I have everything good I need right here." As Thomas grew from an infant to a baby, his personality began to emerge. He was a happy child, quick to smile and laugh, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He was fascinated by everything, reaching for objects with chubby hands and babbling constantly in his own language. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Xavier expanded the herd and improved the bloodlines, while Grace managed the finances with a shrewd eye. They hired permanent help, 2 young cowboys who lived in the bunkhouse Xavier built and treated Grace with the respect she deserved. In the summer of 1881, Grace told Xavier she was pregnant again. This time the sickness was milder, and she continued to manage the household with Thomas on her hip, singing while she worked. Their daughter was born in March of 1882, an easy birth that lasted only a few hours. They named her Margaret Ann, and she was as sweet-tempered as her brother was energetic. Grace cried when she held her daughter for the first time, tracing the baby's perfect, unmarked face with gentle fingers. "She is beautiful," Xavier said, sitting beside his wife on the bed with Thomas cuddled against his side, curious about his new sister. "She is perfect," Grace agreed. "They both are. Xavier, we made these perfect children. We made a family." Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. The house was never quiet anymore, filled with Thomas's endless questions and Margaret's coos and babbles. Xavier added on to the house again, giving each child their own small room and creating more space for their growing family. Grace bloomed in motherhood, her confidence growing as the children thrived under her care. She no longer flinched when people stared, no longer tried to hide the scarred side of her face. She had found her place in the world, and the opinions of others mattered less and less. The children grew up knowing their mother was scarred, but never knowing it was something to be ashamed of. Thomas would trace the scars with his small fingers and ask what happened, and Grace would tell him the story simply and without fear. "A long time ago, there was a fire. I was hurt, but I survived. These scars are proof that I am strong." "You are the strongest person I know, Mama," Thomas would say seriously, and Grace would hug him close, tears in her eyes. Margaret, as she grew older, would kiss her mother's scars and declare them beautiful, parroting what she had heard her father say countless times. "Papa says you are beautiful, so you must be. Papa is always right." "Your papa is a smart man," Grace would agree, smiling. In 1884, Grace gave birth to their third child, another son they named James. The birth was easy and the baby healthy, and Xavier watched his wife nurse their newest child with a sense of profound gratitude for the life they had built together. "We have been married 6 years," he said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Thomas chase Margaret around the yard while James slept in Grace's arms. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you walked through that gate. Sometimes it feels like you have always been here. I feel like I have been waiting my whole life to find this place," Grace said softly. "Waiting to find you, waiting to find home. The years before I came here feel like they happened to someone else. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not answered my advertisement? Sometimes. I think I would have survived the way I had been surviving. But I would not have lived. I would not have loved. I would not have known what it was to be truly happy." She looked at him, her scarred face lovely in the golden light of sunset. "You gave me more than a job, Xavier. You gave me a life worth living. You gave me the same. Before you came, I was just going through the motions. You reminded me what it meant to live, not just exist." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to emerge. Thomas and Margaret came running up, breathless and laughing, demanding bedtime stories. Xavier carried Thomas while Grace carried Margaret, James still sleeping peacefully, and they went inside together to tuck their children into bed. Later, in their own bed, with the house quiet around them and moonlight streaming through the window, Xavier traced the scars on Grace's face with gentle fingers, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage. "Still beautiful," he murmured, and she smiled. "I believe you now. Finally, after all these years, I believe you. What changed? I started seeing myself the way you see me, the way the children see me, not as someone disfigured and damaged, but as someone strong and whole and worthy of love." Xavier kissed her softly. "You are all of those things and more." They made love slowly and sweetly, a reaffirmation of vows spoken years ago, and renewed every day through their actions and choices. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and growth. The children thrived, growing tall and strong. Thomas inherited his mother's sharp intelligence and his father's work ethic, spending his days helping on the ranch, and his evenings reading every book he could get his hands on. Margaret was quieter, artistic, spending hours drawing the landscape around her with surprising skill. James was the adventurous one, always climbing trees he should not climb and exploring places he should not explore, giving his parents countless scares, but also endless entertainment. The ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. Xavier's careful breeding program produced cattle that commanded premium prices, and Grace's financial management ensured they saved money and invested wisely. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to provide for their children and give them opportunities neither Xavier nor Grace had growing up. In 1890, when Thomas was 10, he came home from school upset. Xavier found him in the barn, angrily throwing hay. "What happened?" Xavier asked, taking the pitchfork gently from his son's hands. "Billy Henderson said Mama is ugly. He said her face is scary and that people laugh at our family behind our backs." Thomas's face was red with anger and unshed tears. "I hit him and the teacher sent me home." Xavier knelt to his son's level. "Listen to me, Thomas. Your mother has scars, yes, but those scars are not ugly, and they are certainly nothing to be ashamed of. They are proof that she survived something terrible, that she is strong enough to keep going even when life is hard. Anyone who thinks that makes her less beautiful does not understand what true beauty means. But Billy said people laugh at us. Let them laugh. We know the truth. We know that we have something precious in our family, something worth more than all the unmarked faces in the world. We have real love, real strength, real loyalty. That matters more than what small-minded people think. Thomas thought about this, his young face serious. You think Mama is beautiful? I know she is. Inside and out. I have thought so since the day I met her, and I will think so until the day I die. Then I will think so too, and if anyone says different, I will hit them again. Xavier had to fight back a smile. Maybe use your words instead of your fists, but I appreciate your loyalty to your mother. She deserves to be defended. That evening, Thomas told Grace what happened, apologizing for fighting. Grace pulled him close, tears in her eyes. You do not need to fight for me, sweetheart. People will always judge what they do not understand. But I appreciate that you love me enough to want to defend me. Papa says you are the most beautiful woman in the world, and I believe him. Your papa is biased, but I love him for it. As the children grew older, they each developed a fierce protective streak where their mother was concerned. Margaret would glare at anyone who stared too long, while James once threw a rock at a traveling salesman who made a rude comment. Grace was embarrassed, but also secretly pleased that her children loved her so fiercely. In 1895, Xavier and Grace celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. The children organized a surprise celebration, decorating the house with wildflowers and convincing Mrs. Green to make a special cake. 17 years, Grace said as they danced together in their living room, children and friends clapping along. Who would have thought? I would have, Xavier said. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were going to change my life. I just did not realize how completely. You changed mine, too. You gave me everything I thought I could never have. A home, a family, love, respect. You gave me my life back. You earned all of that yourself. I just had the good sense to recognize what I was seeing and not let you get away. As the evening wound down and the guests departed, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset, a tradition they had maintained for years. Thomas sat on the railing, now a young man of 15 with his father's height. Margaret cuddled against her mother's side, 13 and lovely. James, at 11, sprawled on the porch floor with their old dog, Content and Sleepy. Tell us the story, Margaret said, as she often did. Tell us how you met. Grace and Xavier exchanged a smile, having told this story countless times but never tiring of it. Your father put an advertisement in the general store, Grace began. He needed a housekeeper and I needed a job. I saw her walking up the drive, Xavier continued. She had her head held high even though she expected to be turned away. She had this look in her eyes that said she dared the world to hurt her anymore. And Papa did not turn me away. Instead, he hired me on the spot. Because I could see what she was. Capable, intelligent, strong, beautiful. Margaret sighed happily, having heard this part many times. And then Papa told you that you were beautiful. He did. I did not believe him at first. But he kept saying it until you did, Thomas added. He did. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with him. With his kindness, his strength, his absolute refusal to see me as anything less than whole and worthy. And I fell in love with her courage, her resilience, her dry wit that made me laugh after months of grief, with everything she was and everything she is. James rolled over to look up at his parents. And then you got married and had us. And then we got married and had you, Xavier confirmed. Best decision I ever made, hiring your mother. Second best was convincing her to marry me. Third best was having us, Margaret said with a grin. That goes without saying, Grace said, reaching down to ruffle her daughter's hair. They sat together as the sky darkened, a family complete in content, bound by love and blood and shared history. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to years of hard work and partnership. In 1898, Thomas left for university in California, the first Crawford to pursue higher education. Grace cried when he left but was proud, knowing they had given him opportunities neither of them had enjoyed. Margaret discovered she had a talent for teaching and began helping at the local school, patient with the younger children in a way that reminded Xavier of his wife. James declared his intention to be a rancher like his father, spending every free moment working with the cattle and learning the business from the ground up. As the new century approached, Xavier and Grace sat on their porch one evening, now in their 40s but still deeply in love. The house behind them was quiet, with Margaret and James both staying with friends in town, leaving them alone for a rare evening. "When you walked through that gate 20 years ago, could you have imagined this?" Xavier asked, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Not even in my wildest dreams. I thought I would spend my life alone, moving from position to position, always on the outside looking in. I never imagined I would have a home, a husband who loves me, children who are proud of me. And I thought I would live and die a lonely rancher, going through the motions without ever really feeling anything again. Then you arrived and brought this place back to life." Grace leaned her head against his shoulder. "We built something good here, Xavier. Something worth more than money or status or any of the things the world values. We built a real family, based on love and respect and acceptance. We did. And I would not change a single moment of it, not even the hard parts. Not even the morning sickness," Grace teased. "Well, maybe that part," Xavier admitted with a laugh, "but not the result of it. Our children are the best thing we ever did. Besides each other." "Besides each other," he agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding vows, the births of their children, and every moment of their life together. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers. "Do you know what I realized today?" Grace said softly. "I have been happy longer than I was sad. The years with you outnumber the years before, and all those dark times feel like they happened to a different person. They did happen to a different person. You were a young woman alone and frightened, trying to survive in a world that was cruel to you. Now you are Grace Crawford, wife and mother, partner in a successful ranch, beloved by your family and respected by your community. You grew into a different person entirely. Because you saw who I could become, because you loved me into being the person I was always meant to be." Xavier turned to face her fully, cupping her scarred face in his hands as he had done countless times over the years. "I did not love you into being anything. I just loved you exactly as you were and gave you the space to bloom. You did the growing yourself." Grace kissed him, a kiss that still held passion even after 20 years together. "I love you, Xavier Crawford, with everything I am, everything I was, and everything I will be. And I love you, Grace Crawford, my beautiful, strong, remarkable wife." In 1902, Thomas returned from university with a teaching degree and a young woman named Sarah whom he planned to marry. Grace cried happy tears meeting her future daughter-in-law, welcoming her warmly into the family. The wedding took place at the ranch that summer, with half the territory in attendance. Margaret married a young rancher from a neighboring property 2 years later, a kind man who treated her with respect and affection. She moved only 10 miles away, close enough to visit frequently. James took over more and more of the ranch work as Xavier's hair turned gray and his joints began to ache. He proved to be a natural rancher with his father's eye for cattle and his mother's head for business. In 1905, Thomas and Sarah gave them their first grandchild, a girl they named Grace. When Grace held her tiny namesake for the first time, she wept with joy. "I never thought I would be a grandmother," she said through her tears. "I never thought I would live long enough, be loved enough, matter enough to have this. "You have always mattered," Xavier said, his own eyes damp as he watched his wife cradle their grandchild. "To me, to our children, and now to this little one who will grow up knowing the remarkable woman she was named for." More grandchildren followed over the years. Margaret had 3 sons in quick succession, while James eventually married and had 2 daughters. The ranch house was frequently filled with the sounds of children playing, of family gatherings that spilled out onto the porch and into the yard. Grace taught her grandchildren to bake bread and sew and keep house, passing on the skills that had once been her only means of survival. She told them stories of her youth, not shying away from the difficult parts, teaching them about resilience and strength. Xavier taught the boys to ride and rope, to judge cattle and mend fence, to work hard and treat others fairly. He taught the girls the same things, believing every child should know how to care for themselves regardless of gender. In 1912, Xavier and Grace celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends. They were both in their 60s now, silver-haired and slower moving, but their love had not diminished with time. If anything, it had deepened, enriched by years of shared experience and mutual support. 34 years, Grace marveled as they sat together that evening after everyone had left, the house quiet once more. "We have been married longer than I was alive before I met you." "Best 34 years of my life," Xavier said. "Every day with you has been a gift. Even when I was impossible during the pregnancies, even then. Especially then because it meant we were building our family together." Grace reached for his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. Her hands were spotted with age now, marked by decades of work, but Xavier still found them beautiful. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I have been thinking about mortality lately," Grace said quietly. "We are not young anymore, Xavier. The years ahead are fewer than the years behind. I know. It frightens me sometimes, the thought of losing you, or you might lose me first. I do not know which would be worse, leaving you alone or being left alone myself." Xavier pulled her closer, feeling the fragility in her bones that had not been there when she was young. "Then we will hope for many more years together. And when the time comes, whichever of us is left will carry on because that is what we do. We keep going. You taught me that. Before you, I was just surviving. You taught me how to truly live. And you taught me that beauty has nothing to do with physical perfection. You taught me that strength can look like survival, that love can heal old wounds, and that taking a chance on someone unexpected can change your whole life." They sat together as the night deepened around them, 2 people who had found each other against the odds and built something lasting. The ranch was quiet except for the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the grass. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls chronicling their life together. Their wedding day, the births of their children, family gatherings, grandchildren's first steps. Each photograph was a moment captured in time, proof that they had lived and loved and created something that would last beyond them. Their children would carry on their legacy, teaching their own children the lessons Xavier and Grace had learned through years of partnership and love. In 1915, Xavier fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For weeks he lingered between life and death while Grace nursed him tirelessly, refusing to leave his side. The children came and went, bringing medicine and food, but Grace remained constant, spooning broth between his lips and wiping his fevered brow. "You have to get better," she whispered to him during the darkest nights. "I am not ready to lose you yet. We have more years to live, more grandchildren to meet. You cannot leave me now." Slowly, painfully, Xavier recovered. By spring he was back on his feet, weaker than before but alive. Grace had aged visibly during his illness, the fear of losing him carving new lines into her face. But when he was finally well enough to sit on the porch again, she sat beside him and took his hand with a smile of pure relief. "You frightened me," she said simply. "I frightened myself. But I am still here, and so are you. That is what matters." They sat together in the spring sunshine, grateful for each day they had been given and each day still to come. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. More grandchildren were born, and Xavier and Grace watched with pride as their children thrived in their own lives, passing on the values of hard work, respect, and love. In 1920, as Xavier approached 70 and Grace 65, they sat together one evening reviewing their lives. Thomas was a respected teacher with 3 children of his own. Margaret was a devoted mother and active in her community. James had taken over the ranch entirely now, running it with the same skill and dedication Xavier had shown. "We did well," Xavier said, looking at the photographs that covered their walls. "Our children are good people, our grandchildren are thriving, and the ranch is in capable hands." "We did better than well," Grace corrected gently. "We built a legacy of love. We proved that acceptance and kindness matter more than appearance or status. We created a family that values people for who they are, not what they look like. That was mostly you. You taught our children not to judge people by their scars. I taught them what you taught me. That beauty comes from within, that strength can look different from what we expect, and that love sees past the surface to the truth beneath." Xavier reached for her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after more than 40 years together. "I meant what I said that day in the kitchen, you know. The day I first told you that you were beautiful, I meant every word. I know you did. It just took me a long time to believe it." Grace turned to look at him, her scarred face soft with love. "But I believe it now. Not because my scars disappeared or because I stopped caring what people think. I believe it because I see myself reflected in your eyes, in our children's eyes, and I like what I see. I see someone who survived, who loved, who built a good life from almost nothing. That is beautiful." "That is beautiful," Xavier agreed. "Just as you are beautiful, inside and out, scars and all, the most beautiful thing I ever found." They kissed then, a sweet kiss that held 40 years of shared history, of triumphs and struggles, of passionate love and comfortable companionship. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Promise me something," Grace said softly. "Anything. When we are gone, when this is all just photographs on a wall and stories the grandchildren tell, promise me that people will remember we loved each other truly. Not that I was scarred and you married me anyway, but that we built something real and lasting together. That our love mattered." "Our love will matter," Xavier promised. "Our children will remember and teach their children, who will teach their children in turn." The story of Grace and Xavier Crawford, who found each other against the odds and built a life filled with love and respect and joy. That story will live on. Then I am content. Whatever time we have left, whether it is years or months or days, I am content. I have lived a full life, a happy life, a life I never dreamed possible when I walked through that gate 42 years ago. And I have lived a better life than I ever deserved, all because I placed an advertisement in a general store and a courageous young woman decided to answer it. They sat together as the stars emerged, the same stars that had witnessed every moment of their journey together. The night was peaceful and cool, carrying the promise of spring. Inside the house that they had built together, photographs chronicled their life, telling the story of 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most and created something beautiful together. In 1925, Xavier passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. his hand clasped in Grace's as it had been for 47 years. Grace mourned deeply, but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the life they had built together, and in the knowledge that she had been loved completely for nearly 5 decades. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by family, teaching her great-grandchildren to bake bread and telling them stories of their grandfather, the man who had seen past her scars to the person beneath. She spoke of his kindness, his strength, his absolute conviction that she was beautiful, and how he had never wavered in that belief from the day they met until the day he died. When Grace passed in 1930, at the age of 75, she was laid to rest beside Xavier on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple but meaningful. Grace Morgan Crawford, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, beautiful in all ways. Their children and grandchildren gathered around the grave, sharing memories and tears. Thomas told the story of how his parents met, how his father had placed an advertisement and his mother had answered it, how Xavier had seen past the scars to the remarkable woman beneath. He told her she was beautiful, Thomas said, his own hair now gray, his own grandchildren gathered around him. And he meant it. Every day of their lives together he saw her beauty, and eventually she saw it too. That is their legacy to us. To see past the surface, to value strength over appearance, to build our lives on love and respect rather than shallow concerns. The story of Xavier and Grace Crawford became family legend, passed down through generations as an example of true love. Their great-grandchildren grew up hearing about the cowboy who hired a housekeeper with a scarred face and told her she was beautiful, and how that simple act of seeing and valuing another person had created a legacy that lasted long after they were gone. The ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to their hard work and dedication. The house they had expanded together still stood, filled with new families but holding the memory of the love that had created it. The photographs on the walls showed a couple who had aged together with grace and dignity, their love evident in every captured moment. And in every generation, parents told their children the story of Xavier and Grace, teaching them that true beauty lies not in perfection but in strength, not in unmarked skin but in courage, not in appearance but in character. They taught them that love sees truly, values deeply, and lasts forever when it is built on a foundation of respect and genuine affection. The tale of the cowboy and his scarred housekeeper, of how he had seen her beauty when no one else would, of how they had built a life together filled with love and family and joy, became more than just a family story. It became a reminder that every person has value, that scars tell stories of survival rather than shame, and that the greatest love stories are those built on seeing and cherishing the truth of another person. Xavier had told Grace she was beautiful, and in doing so, he had given her more than compliments. He had given her the gift of being seen, truly seen, for who she was rather than what the fire had done to her. And Grace, in accepting that gift and eventually believing it, had given Xavier the gift of her trust, her love, and her partnership in building something lasting. Their love story endured because it was real, because it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection, and because it proved that the things that truly matter in life, love, family, loyalty, courage, have nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with the content of one's character. In the end, Xavier and Grace Crawford's legacy was not the ranch they had built or the money they had accumulated, though both were considerable. Their legacy was the family they had created, the values they had instilled, and the love story they had lived that continued to inspire generations long after they were gone. It was proof that beauty, true beauty, comes from within, And that love, real love, sees past the surface to the eternal soul beneath. And so the story lives on, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes the most profound love stories begin with a simple want advertisement, and a woman brave enough to answer it, and that the words, "You are beautiful," can change a life, a family, and ultimately, the world for those who hear them and finally believe.